relax, and let's have a chapter chat. I'm your host, Jessica Foster, and I'm so excited to introduce you to author Priya Parmar. She has a new novel out, The Original. Priya, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me on, for inviting me.
And this is a historical fiction novel, and let's tell our listeners a little bit about what they can expect from The Original.
Well, it's the story of Katherine Hepburn's early life. It's before she became a star. She went to Hollywood. She was grieving. She had a deeply traumatic childhood, and this was really the sort of all of what she went through to become the person that we remember today. And it was not at all what I expected her life to be when I started researching. So she went through some ups and downs, definitely.
And what made you pick Katherine Hepburn as a subject to begin with?
It's interesting. So many people don't know her movies necessarily, but they know who she is because she became such a cultural icon.
Right.
And I was just interested in how she got to that sort of status where she lives in the collective imagination in the way that she does. And so once I started looking into her life, it was like a rabbit hole, and I just fell down and couldn't stop. So it was fascinating.
She really was an interesting person and had so many layers to her, which I think makes for a great novel.
Yeah, she was just a massive contradictions, and she was not at all kind of the traditional starlet. And she didn't play the part of a traditional starlet. She, she was bisexual. Or in my story, and from what I can tell from my research, it was very likely she was bisexual. She had very strong opinions about how she wanted to come across. It was bold and exciting and just utterly compelling for me as a researcher and as a writer.
And what do you hope that your readers get from this book?
Well, it's interesting. It's when you write a novel, I always hope that the reader is going to come away with a sense of recognition in the novel. I hope they find something that they recognize either from their own life or from something familiar. And I hope that they feel not so much that they learned about her, but that they learned or they experienced, this sort of emotional, giant, sweeping trajectory that is what I experienced as I was writing it. That feeling of being super invested in a character and really caring what happens to them.
And I think that the title of this novel is fitting, The Original.
Well, I started to ask people, what are the words you most associate with her? And I was asking people in airports and, just literally like I would stand in line in the airport and just be like, by the way, have you heard of Katherine Hepburn? What are the 3 words you associate most with her? And original just came up again and again and again. And I couldn't figure out a title. And I wasn't doing that to figure out a title. I was just doing that because I was interested in how people saw her. And my friend Paula McLean, she wrote The Paris Wife and The Gorgeous Skylark that just came out this January. She, wonderful writer. We were on a walk in New York and we were throwing around titles and she just suddenly said, The Original. And I was like, that's it. And it's that feeling of recognition when you're like, oh, that's it. That's my title. And titles are hard for me. So I was very, very grateful. So
yeah, I can see, because a title, that is the first thing that people see about your book, and that and the cover as well. So you want that to have an impact.
Yes. Well, the cover was a picture that I had had it's a picture that I've loved for a really long time, and I had taped it to the wall of, every wall, every office that I've ever worked in. I taped it, it was actually, I had a postcard of it, I think, in my dorm room in college at one point. It was just a photograph that I had loved, but I hadn't even known it was her for a long time. And then when I started researching this novel, I found that picture, and I just knew that was what I wanted for my cover. And Random House were wonderful, and they got it, and we tracked down the rights, and it was really wonderful to have that as my cover after having that live in my head for so long.
It is a beautiful picture, and it's one that I had never seen before either until I saw it on the cover of your book.
Yeah. It's from 1934, and it was a wonderful photographer who was very famous in his time, but is sort of less famous now. And it was this series of photographs that you don't associate with her because they're not the sort of the studio shots. He took that in a field, literally in a field.
What I love about it is that I think that it just gets that natural element of her. It's almost like you really see who she is.
Yeah. And from what I can tell from this sort of series of photographs, I mean, she was literally sitting in a field of, tall grass. And it just looks like he just took photographs of her, you know, lifting her face up to the sunshine. I don't think she was posing. She was just, you know, spending time in this field with him, and he just took all these pictures of her, and they're brilliant. They're so alive.
And after investing so much time in one individual and researching and writing, I know that you feel so connected to that person. And do you just
Yeah.
ever think, oh, if I could just spend one day with her?
I would I mean, I would be terrified and hugely intimidated after speaking to so many people who knew her. She had some strong opinions, and she was not afraid to share them. And so I would be fairly daunted, but I would be thrilled to meet her. I mean, I have so many questions for her.
What are some of the questions that you would ask?
Oh, goodness, because there's so much you don't know about a life, so the chronology, the sort of the upper crust of all of the that topography of what happened, but you don't know the emotional, um, sort of underpinnings of why things happened, and that's where the fiction is. That's the sort of negative space where the fiction lives. And, I would love to ask her, why did she well, I can't actually say that. That would be a huge book spoiler in case people don't know. But I would love to say, what happened with her relationship with, Laura Harding? What happened with her relationship with Howard Hughes? Where, you know, how did she happen to decide that she wanted to wear trousers in 1933 and then just, never never she wanted to wear skirts again in her private life? How did she feel cutting off all of her hair, for Sylvia Scarlett? Just all these things that I was guessing at. Um,
Right.
and and her I mean, if I had the courage, I would love to ask her about, her brother. What does she think happened?
Hmm.
Her it happens very early in the novel, but she had a incredibly traumatic, life as a teenager, and that's what she was going into Hollywood with, she'd discovered him after he'd committed suicide.
That is so tragic and difficult for any family. And I always, when we mention something like that, I always tell people that if they are going through something, never hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, and this was such a different time, and it was I mean, I you know, I do I it's such a delicate subject, and I spoke to so many mental health care professionals as I was writing this novel, because approaching it was I wanted to do it with so much care and so much, attention to what people in that, um, you know, families that are going through this terrible, terrible tragedy, I wanted to do it in a way that would be deeply, deeply respectful to them. And it just, I- it left me, that section of the book took me about a year, because I was taking such care and talking to so many people about it.
And you can tell how much care you put into this novel and how much research you put into it. I can tell the depths of that as a reader. And I think anyone who reads this novel will see that.
Oh, I'm so glad. My first life was an academic. I got my PhD in literature and theater, and I was on my way to being an academic. So research was sort of my first love. And then I ended up realizing I really didn't want to write critical writing. I wanted to do creative writing. And but the research, the incredible, careful research has stayed with me. That part is something that served me really well as a novelist. It's yeah. So it's something that when you're doing a doctorate, you just the amount of 17,000
Right.
footnotes. You have to keep track of everything. So keeping track of everything for the novel was a lot easier with that kind of training.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Yeah, that served you well with this. And I think that
Yeah.
that lends itself great for historical fiction, the background that you
Yeah.
have.
Oh, good. I'm glad that comes through. But it's also so hard because with historical fiction, you've spent all of this time and you've researched all these things and you're like, but that took me a month to find out, the price of that shoe. I needs to go in the novel, and then it goes on the cutting room floor, and you just have to accept, that 99% of what you research is going to inform your writing, but it's not actually going to live on the page, because I want it to feel like I absolutely had done it, but I wasn't going to weigh the reader down with it. So it's just a process of cutting it away and cutting it away and cutting it away, because you want to keep it all after you've gone through so much to get it.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that makes complete sense. I would also think that it's probably difficult when you do all of this research and things are based in fact to sometimes get away from the fact to create the fiction.
Very much. Very, very much. You have to let go of everything that the sort of the biographers have said, everything that all the other, critical sources have said. Take the facts of what they said, and take the sort of all of the kernels of experience that they've found, that she had lived. And then you have to really, or I have to let the character that you've been living with, that's been living in your brain, let them come forward and really start to speak.
And how much time did you spend? I know that you said you spent a huge amount of time just in one section. How long did it take you overall to create this work?
Well, I started it, and then I started it a long time ago. And then I had to put it down because I wrote a show in the UK. I'm also a playwright, and I wrote a show in the West End. So that was it. I think I worked for about 4 or 5 years, and then I put it down, and then I did the show for several years, and then I came back to it. So altogether, I've been living with this character for about 10 years.
Wow. And that's a long time to be living with one character.
It is. It is a really long time, and you miss them horribly once it's done. You sort of get homesick for the world that you've been living in.
And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about being a playwright. And let's talk about some of the comparisons. Like, how is it the same? How is it different?
Oh, goodness. It's so writing a novel, you have to really, all of the creative work for the first huge chunk until there's a manuscript that your editor sees, all happens in your own head. All of that creative imagining, all of that, um, figuring out that puzzling, that emotional puzzling, figuring out the emotional math of who this character is and everything. That all happens in your own head. In the theater, it's very collaborative. You try something on the stage, it works, it doesn't work. You can see, you go back to the drawing board, you're working with designers, musicians, like I had a co-writer. It's incredibly, incredibly collaborative. So it's all much more external. Whereas writing a novel, it's very, very internal.
That's interesting that you say that, because I've talked to a lot of authors who say it can be a little bit lonely sometimes, but that also probably allows you to almost have that connection and that relationship with your characters on the page.
You can't, it's a delicate relationship. It's sort of like you can't allow any cooks in the kitchen in that early part. Because for me, the characters, so first I read everything. I read everything I can get my hands on. I start with primary documentation. So I go and I found her letters, and I found, and I'm tracking all of it down, and I'm reading everything I can. And then you read all of the secondary sources, and you read all of the biographies, and you go to the places she lived, and you just hope that that character is going to start to speak. Once they start speaking, you really don't want to kind of get in the way of that. You want to just stay very still and just hope that they keep going, for the whole of the novel. You just hope it happens. And it's a kind of a magical process that my editor's going to kill me for saying this, but I don't completely understand how you get from A to B. And then once it's there, once it's all there on the page, that's when you let other people in, and that's when other people see it, and other people start to, your editor starts to help you, this doesn't quite work. And that's when other readers become so important, because you're way too close to it to have any idea of, what's going on.
Oh, that makes sense, because in journalism, we write a report and then we have to have someone else look at it, because you do get so close to it.
Yeah, but this took me 3 weeks. I can't possibly lose this section.
Right.
And that's where the kill your darlings stuff comes in, and you have to listen to someone else. And if you're really lucky, you have a great editor. And I have a wonderful editor who I'd worked with on my last novel, so I trusted, completely. And she knows, if I tell her, like, I really, really love it, I really don't want to lose this part, she'll look at it really critically. And then if she says, yeah, but you really have to, I know.
Right.
I still really have to.
Yes. As hard as it is.
Yeah, it is. It's really hard. And it's, sometimes you'll build a lot of scaffolding around a sentence you really like, and you need all these other sentences to get to that one sentence that you really, really like. But that sentence is the problem, because it's all the scaffolding that has to go. So, like, out it goes.
Yeah.
So I can imagine you have the same with, condensing down something that somebody's work. It's, and I lost about, I don't know, like 100 pages.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah. I wanted it to be not, there's history and then there's story. And I wanted this very much to be a story. And I wanted it to be, not the whole of her life, but just this experience, this story that I'm telling of her, losing all, gaining all of her power, and then losing all of her power, and then how she got it back.
Right.
That's kind of the story I wanted to tell. And in there are, so many things that I loved. Little Women was one of my favorite films growing up. And, I wanted to go into everything about Little Women, but you can't, you have to stick to the story you're telling.
Oh, I loved Little Women growing up as well. Oh.
It's so good. I would wait all year for it to come on. It came on TV once a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember waiting.
I remember my mom, she recorded it on a VHS for me when it came on, and I would just rewatch it. And I remember I had a little sleepover with one of my friends one time, and I said, oh, we have to watch Little Women. And I remember her not feeling it as much as I did. And I'm like, what's wrong with you?
Yes. Yes. I had that exact type of thing. I remember I think it was like I don't know, maybe my 10th birthday. And my mom had recorded Little Women, and it was another old film that nobody else was interested. I think it was Gigi. And
Uh-huh.
everyone was like, we don't get it.
Right.
We're not interested. And we would like to watch, Grease.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, okay.
I know. I still just have that vivid memory, like looking over at my friend sitting on the sofa, and I'm like, what's the deal? Why are you not into this?
I totally understand that.
Yes.
I was just not like, look what's happening to Beth. Don't you care? Like,
Yes.
yeah, I know. I get it. I totally get it.
That's so funny.
I
Let's
know.
talk a little bit about the research again. I know we dug into that a lot, but I feel like genuine hardcore research is hard to come by in today's times because we have AI and people can just go on the internet and look things up. But I almost feel like the research that you need for projects like this, it's getting lost on some of the younger generation.
Yes. Because the thing is you don't know what you're looking for. I don't know what I'm looking for. When I'm doing the research, I don't know what I don't know yet. And in order to use the AI chat GPT, you have to be asking a specific question. And if you don't know, what you don't know about her, if you don't know, um, all of these little side events that happened in her life led me to so much about her character, about who she was, about little episodes that I knew nothing about. And I would never have known to chat, to ask whatever AI about them because I didn't know they existed. So unless you actually do that research, do that legwork yourself, you can't, nobody can do it for you. None of those happy accidents will happen. And I mean, I wouldn't know how to find my story. I don't know what a novel's about when I start.
Mm-hmm.
I have to find the story as I go. And it's just those accidents in the research, just those things that I come upon that I didn't know were there, I didn't know anything about them, that lead me to the story that I want to tell.
As a journalist, I love research. Again, going back to my childhood, my grandparents, they had a room that just had tons of encyclopedias because my grandfather would always buy the encyclopedias, like the whole sets of them. And I loved going to their house and I would just pick up one and just start researching about a subject. And I learned so much as a little child by doing that.
Yeah. And you wouldn't, if you were just, if it were built differently and if it were sort of like AI, the encyclopedias would be behind glass and you would have to know what to ask them. And you
Yes.
don't know. You don't know what to ask. And it's just that, I mean, we had, what were they called? World books? That was it,
Yes.
what it was. That was the site of it. That was the encyclopedias that we had. We didn't have the Britannica. We had the World books. And I remember sitting and just going through, pulling down W and just going through, or pulling down H and just going through. And you're just looking at, all of these things that you didn't know were there. And I feel like without having that experience, so much knowledge is going to stop circulating in the world in a really wide way, in a way that's really sad. Because ChatGPT doesn't do that for you, or AI or whatever it is doesn't do that for you.
Right.
And I know it can. I mean, I'm sure it can help with a lot of things. I don't know because I don't use it, but it all kind of freaks me out.
Mhm.
So, but I mean, I know it has. Actually, that's not true. I'm a massive dog person, and I know that there was a guy in Australia who found a vaccine for their dog through Chat GPT. And if it can do things like that, fantastic. have at it. But in
Right.
terms of research for a novel, no, it doesn't work.
Everything can have its place. There can be good things about it, and then there can be some things that you're like, okay, don't want that to take over. And one thing that I don't want us to lose as a society is our creativity and the creativity that comes out when we dig deep from within.
Yes. And also the struggle.
Yeah.
It's a real struggle to to write. And I'm sure you have this with journalists where you know, it's hard, and there are moments where you want to do anything else and you would love to bring in something else to just write it for you, and that would be amazing, but it's just that struggle that leads you to the great stuff, and without it I don't think you can really write a great novel. I don't think you can convey all of that stuff in yourself that you don't completely understand. I don't think you can find words for it.
Yeah. I've also noticed in society, we spend a lot of time trying to eliminate struggle.
Yeah.
And, there's so much growth and beauty that comes from the struggle.
Yeah. And writing a novel is a deeply uncomfortable process at a lot of times. And then there are the times that are worth everything, where it feels like you're just flying because you've got it and you've sort of hit something and it's working and it's flowing, and that's amazing and that's wonderful. But it's only a matter of time before you know, hit trouble again, and you've got to just sort of deck it out and get there. And that push pull is that's the sort of the grist. That's what writing a novel is. And then what you want is for it to look easy. You want it to seem easy. You want it to feel inevitable. You don't want any of that struggle to turn up on the page. But definitely, you need it to get there. You need it to get it all onto the page.
And is there
So
anything that you want to say to your readers out there?
I just I wrote it for them. My favorite thing is when someone reads something that I've written and then they said, "Oh my goodness, I went and I Googled this and I Googled that and I looked up this, and the next time I'm, in Los Angeles or in Connecticut or, whatever, I want to go and look and see and discover more and find out." And, that kind of feeling like it's going to belong to them and have, you know, that kind of impact where it leads to, more interest. That's what I hope for. And I hope they enjoy it.
Well, I know that it's already getting some great reviews, people enjoying it, discovering new things. Priya, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Yeah, so fun. And the original out now. You've been listening to Chapter Chat. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Happy reading.